Here are the notes for Chapter 5, Section 6. In this section, we're going to discover properties of special quadrilaterals. Please make sure you take good notes, include diagrams, mark your diagrams appropriately so you can use those to do both classwork and studying from. Here's my special quadrilateral family tree. The founder of my family is the quadrilateral. That we know is a four-sided polygon. So from the four-sided polygon, any random four-sided polygon, there are some special specific types of quadrilaterals. The first is a kite. Now we've already defined a kite and talked about the properties of a kite earlier in Chapter 5. So we know a quadrilateral with two pair of consecutive congruent sides is the definition of a kite. The non-vertex angles of a kite are congruent. The diagonals bisect the vertex angles, and that same diagonal that connects the vertex angles, that is the perpendicular bisector of the other diagonal. So that's old news. Now, we also have a trapezoid, and we know that a trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of opposite parallel sides. The angles on the legs are supplementary. So we learned that again earlier in Chapter 5. We also learned about the isosceles trapezoid, and the isosceles trapezoid is a trapezoid with legs that are congruent, base angles that are congruent, and then the one thing that we didn't talk about already but is true is that the diagonals of an isosceles trapezoid are congruent. That's not true in a regular trapezoid or an average trapezoid, but it is true in an isosceles. Now, the bulk of the family you'll see lies under the parallelogram. So parallelogram, again, we learned about this, is a quadrilateral with opposite parallel sides. But there are four things that are also true. And we've already talked about a couple of them. We just haven't really talked about the diagonals yet. So the first is that the opposite sides are congruent. So not only are the opposite sides are parallel, but they're congruent as well. In addition, my opposite angles are congruent. So if you're looking at a parallelogram, you know the angles that are across from one another, not the consecutive angles, are going to be congruent. The consecutive angles are supplementary, and the diagonals bisect each other. So that is what's true about a parallelogram. Now, we also have, from the parallelogram, a rectangle and a rhombus, so it's kind of like brother and sister here, born from the parallelogram. Now, you know, with any family, usually you inherit some traits from the previous generation. So something to think about is that a rectangle and a rhombus, since they are both types of parallelograms, they're going to inherit the qualities of a parallelogram. So that whole thing about the opposite angles and opposite sides being congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, and diagonals are bisected, that's going to be true for both a rectangle and a rhombus. With the rectangle, there's an additional piece of information. So the rectangle is a quadrilateral with four congruent angles, and the diagonals of a rectangle are congruent. When we talk about a rhombus we know to be an equilateral, quadrilateral, or a quadrilateral with four congruent sides, but there's two other things you need to know. The diagonals bisect the angles, and the diagonals are perpendicular to one another. So in addition to all the parallelogram traits, the rectangle and rhombus each have some unique traits. Now, rectangle and rhombus got together and they had square. I know, a little weird, but I don't write this stuff. And unfortunately, because a square is a direct descendant of its parents who are brother and sister maybe, I don't know what the problem is, but square doesn't have any unique characteristics. So a square has all the characteristics of a parallelogram. So opposite sides congruent and parallel, opposite angles congruent, consecutive angles supplementary, and diagonals that bisect each other. It also has the properties of a rectangle and a rhombus. So that means that the diagonals are congruent, and it means that the diagonals are perpendicular and bisect the angles. So that, my friends, is your list of properties for the special quadrilaterals. Please make sure you know these. I will be checking your notes tomorrow in class, so make sure that they are good. Add some diagrams, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.